Everyone Wept. And it comes from this book by Daniel Morden. And I've heard him tell this story. And I bought the book, and as you can see, it's written in it, "Go tell them." So I know he won't mind me telling it. But I've given it a different title because I think it sums it up better to say "The House Where Everyone Wept." So once upon a time there was a house where the son of the house sat in his room, his fist clenched like this, his hand clenched in a fist, and he wept. He wept from morning till night. And his father was so sad that his much-loved son was so unhappy that he too wept. And the servants wept. And probably the dog in the yard wept, and the cattle and the chickens wept. Everybody was weeping because the son was so unhappy. The problem was nobody knew why he was unhappy, so they couldn't help him. And he didn't know why he was unhappy. He'd been away for a while and he didn't know where, and he'd got back home but he didn't know how, and he knew he shouldn't be unhappy, but he didn't know why he was, and he had forgotten something but he didn't know what it was. And the father was so desperate he put word out that if somebody could just stop his son from crying, just make him smile for a while, then that lady would become his bride. And they were quite a wealthy family with a beautiful house and lovely possessions. And he was a very nice person, the son was very nice. So it was quite a good catch for whoever was lucky. And many women had come by and tried their luck. They tried tickling him, they tried singing to him, they tried taking him out into the yard to show him the sunshine and the scenery. Nothing would stop him from being unhappy, nothing would stop him from weeping. And then one day there was a knock at the door, and the servant opened the door to a very rather dishevelled young woman who had obviously not seen such a good time lately. She was very skinny and her clothes were quite dirty and her hair was quite shabby. And she said, "I've been told that if I can stop a young man from being unhappy and from crying, that I could marry him, and this could actually solve a lot of my problems, because as you can see I'm very poor, I'm destitute." And the servant reluctantly took her in, and the master of the house said, "Well, I've got nothing to lose, so go upstairs and see what you can do." So she walked into the room and she greeted the young man who was busy weeping. And she said, "I don't know why you're crying. You live in a beautiful house, you've got beautiful possessions. Me, I've got no mother, no father, I've got nothing, and I'm starving and I'm in rags, as you can see. So let me tell you a story. Maybe that will just take your mind away from whatever is troubling you for a while." And so she sat down, made herself comfortable, and she told him the story of Anwen. Now, Anwen was a young girl who had lost her father when she was young. She lived with her mother, and they were very poor. They were so poor they slept in the same bed. And one day, Anwen had a dream, and she dreamt that she should go travelling, that she should seek the tree where the leaves hung but never grew. Sorry, I forgot the true title of the story here. The crucial thing, the tree where the leaves hung but never grew. And she said to her mother, "I'm going to go and try and find those leaves. I don't know why, but I feel I should. I feel that that could perhaps change our life." And her mother said, "Well, if you must go, go with my blessing, but don't tell anybody what you're seeking. You can't trust people, so keep it to yourself." She kissed her daughter goodbye, and the daughter went off. And she travelled for quite a long time. And one day in her travel she saw a very strange house. And behind the house there was a hill. And on the hill there was a tree. And the tree had 7 branches. And on each branch there was a twig. And on each twig there was a leaf. 7 leaves. And as she was standing there looking at the tree and wondering about it, an old lady approached her and asked her what she was doing there. And she remembered her mother's advice and said, "Oh, I've just been wandering, and I just wondered whether I could perhaps come in for a while and rest and maybe have a drink or something." So the old lady invited her in, gave her something to eat and drink, introduced her to her own daughter, who was actually quite skinny. And in fact, she was called Bag of Bones, rather disrespectfully by her own mother, but she was called Bag of Bones. And the house was kind of weird because it was a house, but on the other side of the house there was a pigsty with a boar snuffling and sniffling away. And they gave Anwen a lovely meal, they invited her to stay the night, and she told them the story that she had left her mother to try and find her fortune somewhere. And the old lady said, well, you know, I need someone to sweep the house, to keep the fire alight, and to feed the boar. If you'd like to stay for a few days, you're very welcome. And Alwyn thought, well, why not? I've got nothing to lose. And she was given 3 good meals a day. She even started to put a bit of weight on. And of course, the days passed by. Sometimes during the day, she'd have the opportunity to look out and see the tree with the branches and the twigs and the leaves and wonder. And obviously, you know, time went by, days became weeks, weeks became months, as they do in these stories. And then one day, the mother and the skinny daughter were out, and Anwen went in to give the evening meal to the boar. And she sighed, and she said to herself out loud, oh, I wonder if I'll ever find those leaves. And the snuffling boar said, ha ha, I wondered when you would speak. She was quite shocked. She didn't expect the boar to speak to her. And the boar said, the leaves you seek are the ones that are on the tree. They hang, but they do not grow. And I sought them too. But I made the mistake of telling the old lady she's a witch, and she turned me into a boar. If you could get those leaves, you could turn me back into the young man that I am, and we can get away from here and escape. If you don't do that, they are going to take me for slaughter. And the reason they're fattening you up is so that you become the sow in the corner in my place. Well, Alwyn went to bed that night and she pondered, and she decided that she would be brave, and she crept down the stairs and out of the door, which fortunately didn't creak. And she went off up the hill, and she got down each of the 7 leaves, and she brought them back to the house. And she touched the boar with one of the leaves, because instinctively she knew this is what she should do. And the boar became a very nice looking young man. Very nice looking, in fact. Made a heart beat a little bit there. But she kept focused. She knew they had to escape. And so she went over to the poker and to the brush and to the chair, and she touched them with one of the leaves and said, please protect me while we run away. And they ran off into the night. And the next morning the witch woke up and she called out, what are you doing, Anwen? And the poker called back as it poked the fire, I'm lighting the fire. The witch turned over. She went back to sleep. Later she woke up and called out, Anwen, what are you doing? And the broom called back as it swished the floor, I'm brushing the floor, I'm brushing the floor. Later the witch woke up again and called out, where are you, where are you? The chair called back, I'm coming, I'm coming. And at that moment the witch got out of bed, looked out of the window and saw there was no leaves on the tree. And she knew immediately what had happened. And she went downstairs, and there's no Anwen, there's no boar. And she said to her skinny daughter, bag of bones, come here, run after them, find them. And she ran fast after them. And Anwen and the young man heard her coming. And Anwen said, let's use one of the magic leaves. And he became a pond, and she became a duck swimming on the pond. And as the daughter approached and said, Duck, have you seen a young girl pass by here? The duck dived down under the water. The bag of bones went home and said, no, couldn't find them anywhere. There was just a lake with a duck on it. And the witch looked at her daughter and said, you're so stupid. Didn't you realise that that was them? If you could just get me one feather from that duck, I could get them back here straight away. Go back out again. So the daughter ran off again, and they heard her coming, and she took out, and we took out another leaf. And this time she became a rose, and he became a bee. And the daughter stopped and said, Bee, bee, have you seen a girl running by? And the bee just buzzed in the rose and didn't answer. Well, the daughter went home and said, no, Mum, couldn't find them anywhere. They were just a rose with a bee. They didn't know where they'd gone. I didn't see the lake or the duck this time. And I said, if you could just go back out again and bring me one petal from that rose, I can get them back. Go off out again. So the daughter goes out again. She scurries along really fast. And Anwin and the man could hear her feet going flap, 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 flap. And this time they turned into a tree with an apple on it. And the daughter stopped and said to the apple, "Have you seen a girl running by here?" And the apple didn't answer. So the daughter goes back home and says, "No, Mum, didn't see a lake with a duck, and I didn't see a rose with a bee. I just saw a tree with an apple. It's quite a nice apple, but I didn't pick it. It didn't feel like an apple tonight, so I didn't see them." And the mother looked at her and said, "If you want a job doing, you may as well do it yourself. I'll go out and find them myself." So she runs off, and Anwin and the young man hear his feet approaching, and Anwin gives him one of the leaves, the 6th leaf, and she keeps the 7th leaf for herself. And they reached a crossroads, and she said, "Your way home is this way, my way home is this way. Let us meet here again in a week. But do not, when you get home, kiss anybody or let anybody kiss you, because you will forget everything and you will forget that you met me." And so he went off home, and Anwin carried on her journey, and the feet caught up to her and caught up to her. And she felt a hand on her shoulder, and she turned with the leaf, and the witch was immediately turned into a sow. And she went back to the crossroads, and she waited, and she waited, and the young man never appeared. And sadly, she went on home to see her mum. But when she arrived, she found that her mother had died, and she had nothing and no one. And so she wandered, and she wandered. And eventually she came near to a village, and an elderly man allowed her to come in and rest for a while and gave her something to eat and to drink. And he told the story of this house where everyone wept, of a young man that didn't stop weeping, and that if possibly she could stop him from weeping, she could be his wife. And so she came here to try her luck. And the young man looked at her, and he opened his fist, and he smiled, because in his fist was a crushed leaf.
Mm. Ooh.
Oh,
Oh,
lovely.
wow,
Very
look at the
clever.
detail to that story.
Very mysterious story, isn't it?
Very strange, yeah.
Yeah.
But I just, out of the 3 that I was going to tell, this was the one that this morning I thought, no, I have to tell this one. I've never told it other than to the walls in this house.
Yeah.
Practice.
Julia, is it?